All right, this one's been circled for quite some time. Penn State visiting the Shoe to take on the Buckeyes of Ohio State this Saturday. We bring in Claire Crawford from theozone.net, where you can check out her podcast with Joe Dexter. Oh, hell no. But even more important, in some respects, would be the Penn State game this year. Not the Michigan game, but the Penn State game and the vaunted number 2 team in the country, Claire. Wow, should be a great game.
I agree. And leading up to it, it's not just the hype and, the quote revenge factor from last year and the fact that it's going to be in a shoe. And there's a lot of tension built up between these two teams, a little snip back and forth from players and coaches. It's exciting. It is going to be a good game.
Claire, what did we just talk about with a revenge factor? Fill in the folks here, because this needs to be clarified for people once and for all. A true revenge game versus what we have here in Columbus on Saturday.
So I think part of the reason that Urban Meyer he's kind of unsure as to whether he's going to use revenge as fodder in the locker room or not is because it didn't ruin the Buckeyes season last year to lose to Penn State. They lost to Penn State, couldn't play in the Big Ten championship, and still went on to go to the college football playoff, and Clemson ended up, quote, ruining the Buckeyes season. So if anything, the Buckeyes, they could avenge a loss last year and maybe get some pride out of it, but it wasn't a blowout. It can't be something on their mind. What the Buckeyes need to look at is this is their season on the line right here. This is, if they want to advance and they don't want to make Michigan their Super Bowl, this is the game that they have to win right now. Not just because it's in front of them right now, but because it matters most. And like you said, they won't be able to go on to play for the Big Ten championship to represent the East. They won't be able to go on to the college football playoff. Crazier things have happened, so we can't completely write that off, but it would be pretty insane for the Buckeyes to take another loss to the number 2 team in the country and then go on to represent the Big Ten. If the Buckeyes somehow did that, it would be the second team from the Big Ten to represent in the playoffs, and I don't think that's going to happen this year. If anything, it would be 2 SEC teams.
Ohio State fans, especially younger Ohio State fans, if you want to look up a revenge factor, look up Ohio State, Michigan, 1993, 95, 96. Now, those Michigan were ruining seasons. You're undefeated. You're looking to play in the Rose Bowl. You're looking to play for a national championship. You're undefeated. You lose to your arch rival. That's ruining a season. Not when you still get an opportunity to go play for a national championship.
Anybody that wants to complain about the playoff, just please remember the BCS. Just remember how that turned out.
Yeah, it was not good. I complained about it every year and gave valid examples of why it didn't work. Regardless of its defenders, I was able to go A, B, and C. This is why it doesn't work. This is what doesn't make sense. This is who got left out that has just as good a resume as this team over here that got in. Yes, didn't make sense, and we've got a better format. Not perfect, because we've got not 5 perfect conferences trying to squeeze into 4 spots, but better. And for the Buckeyes and the Nittany Lions, for Penn State, it appears to be a clear path. If they beat Ohio State, they will certainly be a huge favorite in the rest of its games, excluding, to a certain extent, the Michigan State game, but they'll be a clear favorite in that one to march on and face most likely Wisconsin. Where for Ohio State, they will still have some work to do although this would appear to be the biggest hurdle to clear to get to the Big Ten championship game. There would still be Michigan State. There would still be a date at Iowa, and there would be Michigan in the path for Ohio State. And if another game is lost by Ohio State and they beat Penn State, then we start to muddy the waters in terms of who makes it out of the Eastern Division, i.e. 2016 all over again, where Michigan beat Penn State beat Ohio State beat Michigan. Maybe we get one of those deals.
I'm not writing anything off in college football ever, and that's one of the reasons I'm a huge college football fan. Anything can happen any week. Every game matters.
JT Barrett's been on fire against lesser competition. The competition, though, has gotten better, It's nothing close to Penn State and what we will see this week with the likes of Marcus Allen, Jason Kabinda, and company on the Penn State defense. But again, Nebraska is probably the best defense Ohio State's seen since Oklahoma, and JT's played much better, looked more confident. Urban Meyer made the comment, Claire, this week that it'll be somewhat interesting for him to see. He's fully confident that JT's taken the steps to eliminate some mistakes and throw it in the right places and do the right things, but he's interested to see it against maybe the best defense they'll see, one of the best defenses they'll see, because, yes, he's taken strides, but until you face this caliber defense, you're not always quite sure if those strides are just better talent or if things have gotten fixed.
And this Penn State defense, make no mistake about it, especially that defensive line, they're getting penetrated. They sacked O'Korn 7 times during that game against our rivals up north. And they're only allowing about 3 yards per carry, which is what Ohio State's defensive line, which is arguably, and not just from an Ohio State fan's perspective, one of the best defensive lines in the country as well. It's going to be probably the biggest defensive challenge that they've faced this year, no doubt about that. JT moving along and progressing is something that you want to see, not just out of your quarterback, but out of your team in general. And yes, they were lesser opponents, but what JT was lacking was not a skill set. What JT was lacking was confidence in his receivers and their timing, and their receivers and their ability to get some separation. Talent was never an issue. That's not something that is going to be developed within a matter of a couple weeks. So what we saw is him building confidence. What I am interested to see is if Ohio State has to fight its way out of a hole at some point, if JT is sacked on a 3rd down or if Ohio State finds himself behind, how much confidence has this team actually built up in order to overcome adversity like that? They've faced adversity before, but we haven't seen them really overcome it.
All right. Grant Haley, a name that comes to mind. He's the kid that returned the block kick last year. He's one of the better players in the secondary for Penn State, 2 interceptions this season. I mentioned Kabinda and Allen. Marcus Allen, one of the very best at the safety position in the country, and Jason Kabinda, a guy that Urban Meyer named in particular in his news conference this week as just being all over the field, where Penn State plays it to a coach's delight, where the defensive linemen get on the offensive linemen and lock up the lanes, lock up the holes, and play their techniques. And it allows the linebackers to roam and remain clean to get to the ball carrier and roam sideline to sideline. And that is what Penn State was able to accomplish against Michigan. On the other side of the football, it all starts with Saquon Barkley, and most people have him slated to win a Heisman. Now, he's passed his first game. Well, let's not discount the Iowa game. He exploded against the Hawkeyes, national TV, primetime game. But against an elite defense in Michigan, or what was thought to be, he had another big game with over 100 yards rushing. Now he faces Ohio State. If you remember correctly, Claire, it was 2 years ago that we didn't know a whole lot about Saquon Barkley. It was only his second full game of the season, and the Buckeyes won the game easily, 38-10, I believe. Christian Hackenberg was in play for Penn State, but Saquon Barkley had a big game against Ohio State, ran for almost 200 yards. So the Buckeyes are familiar with Saquon Barkley, and here he has another opportunity to give the nation a Heisman moment or two.
He does, and I'm very sure that they will know where he is on the field at all times. Urban Meyer mentioned at his press conference he's the most versatile, most complete back that he has probably faced in his career, which is high praise coming from Urban Meyer. He's a great pass catcher. He's a great blocker. He's very reminiscent of what we loved and saw out of Ezekiel Elliott when he had his time here at Ohio State as well. Saquon Barkley is extremely athletic. He's able to make guys miss. He's able to get yards after the catch. He is certainly deserved of his Heisman nod thus far. What Ohio State is going to have to continue to do, they have one of the best red zone defenses in the country, and you'll see, I think, a bend, don't break in this Ohio State defense when it comes to Saquon Barkley. They're just going to have to be very disciplined. And especially with this offense that Penn State runs, at times, especially in big games under big spotlights, some of these guys are so amped up on the Buckeye defense, they're trying to do too much. So at times that can, and we've talked about this before, but just playing assignment football and being disciplined is going to be even more important when somebody like Saquon Barkley is just a wild card.
Claire Crawford joins us from the ozone.net. Please join her right there with her podcast, weekly podcast with Joe Dexter. Oh, hail no. And Claire joins us each and every week to talk Ohio State football and the Buckeyes with their biggest test to date. Number two, Penn State, undefeated after their thrashing of Michigan at home, 42-13. Trace McSorley, 14 touchdowns, 5 picks, hitting on 67% of his passes, Claire. And I think the nightmare scenario for Ohio State fans would be that their great defensive line cannot get to Trace McSorley, and their secondary has a moment or 2 or 10 like it had against Oklahoma and Indiana, in which they can't find receivers. Linebackers are having issues finding tight ends and running backs coming out of the backfield, and it becomes just an open mess of guys running around in the secondary free, and Trace McSorley has just enough time to deliver the football.
So I've been thinking about this as well. It really has been bothering me because I think Indiana kind of knocked on the door of college football and all of the offensive coordinators and said, hey, this may be how you beat Ohio State, maybe. And then Oklahoma just kicked it open like Steve Austin. But it definitely is something I've been trying to find a shelter in the storm, as I like to say. And I think I've found this shelter in the fact that Oklahoma has a much better offensive line than Penn State. We can say that Richard Legault and Baker Mayfield, both mobile quarterbacks, able to extend the play, getting the ball off quickly. That definitely is the recipe for neutralizing Ohio State's defensive line and, kind of preying on an Ohio State secondary that is shown to be the weakness of that defense. However, Penn State's offensive line is improved, but I would not say is on the same level as Oklahoma's offensive line.
I know in talking to, Tim Aiden, he writes for SB Nation's Black Shoe Diaries, covers Penn State football. Talked to him prior to the Michigan game, and he still stated this is an improved unit, but as you mentioned, the weakest unit on the Penn State team. He thought that Penn State would go to great lengths to game plan to protect its offensive line against Michigan's front, which is very, very good. Not as good as Ohio State's, not as dynamic or athletic. Very, very good. Top 5 in the nation, but not as good as Ohio State's. But that there would be issues game planning against Michigan. Well, they certainly got around those issues, obviously, and were able to put up big points against Michigan with Saquon Barkley and Trace McSorley. Penn State's offense is a little bit different this year in that they're much more efficient than they were last year, but not hitting on nearly as many plays. Much of that coming because of the loss of Chris Godwin to the NFL. It's a much more efficient passing game. Trace McSorley maybe not taking as many risks downfield, but they've been efficient, and they've not had to hit on the big play because they've generally been in control of all these games, excluding the game at Iowa, but they were never trailing by more than one score against the Hawkeyes, so they always had it kind of right in front of them. So Penn State and Ohio State, this has turned out to be a big battle in the Big Ten. Penn State joining the league way, way back. I know for you people out there that are of a certain age, you think, obviously, Penn State's a big game. They're in the Big Ten, but I remember those days when Penn State was off playing independent football and they joined the Big Ten, and it was a big deal. There was talk when Penn State joined the Big Ten that, oh, wow, Penn State's going to dominate the Big Ten. They are going to take things over. Well, it's not turned out to be. Yes, they've been a player in the Big Ten, but they've certainly disappeared from the race for 5 and 6 years at a time as well. So Penn State has certainly been a great addition to the Big Ten, but nothing to be scared of, as Ohio State in particular has been the team in the Big Ten since 2001 All right, Claire, what else can we talk about with this Penn State showdown? Anything else we've missed?
I'd say that, just kind of piggybacking on whatever you were talking about with the offensive line, they're doing a great job run blocking, obviously, with Saquon Barkley. And then with the addition of their scary tight end, Mike Gesicki, I mean, he is another guy that they're really going to have to watch out for on the field. I'd say if, the likes of Nick Bosa and Tyquan Lewis are getting that penetration, we might see Gesicki less of a factor as far as a receiver. They may employ him to be a better blocker if they're starting to see problems like that on the edge. If McSorley is getting sacked, I'd say more than twice within the first or second quarter, then that might be taking Gesicki out of the wide receiver equation somewhat, but not completely. That's my only little maybe. Also because, we're watching Penn State's offensive line great with run blocking, not so great with pass block. So we're hopefully, again, that's going to be, we're looking for little tiny edges to squeak out these wins right now. And that's looking like that might be a difference maker.
Ohio State, Penn State, huge battle in the Big Ten, number 2 versus number 6 at the Shoe in Columbus. Claire Crawford from theozone.net and her podcast, Oh, Hail No, joining us to break down the Buckeyes and the Nittany Lions. And I got to think, with all the Saquon Barkley talk, and rightfully so, Claire, that there's one J.K. Dobbins over here kind of saying, hey, I may, do something in this game. I know you're talking about that guy over there, and rightfully so. He's accomplished a ton, and J.K.'s just starting his career. But still, in terms of skill sets, they're pretty comparable.
And J.K. is leading the nation right now in freshmen in rushing yards. And obviously, we know everything there is to know about Barkley. He deserves every accolade that he gets. However, he has yet to put together back-to-back 100-yard plus games. And it's something interesting. Obviously, he put up that many yards and then some last weekend against that state up north. But I wouldn't necessarily say that that's a stat that we can, hang our hats on as Buckeye fans and be like, phew, well, Saquon Barkley's neutralized. We don't have to worry about him getting 100 yards on Ohio State. However, I agree. J.K. Dobbins is looking to put on a show. He's still going to be sharing a little bit of time with Mike Weber. But again, Mike Weber is banged up. He's got a brace on. Apparently, according to Urban Meyer, he is still a go. However, I can see J.K. taking, again, the lion's share. And it's something that he has an opportunity to say, hey, what about me?
J.K. Dobbins has rushed for 18 more yards this season than Saquon Barkley, and he has more yards per carry.
Sharing time.
Yes, he has. So it'll come down to a lot of big-time players making big plays in big spots and teams not making big turnovers and mistakes in big spots. That's what it should come down to with Ohio State taking on Penn State. Hopefully I've not lost Claire, but I think there she is. So I'll finish things up here.
Sorry, it does that every time.
Oh, that's fine. No worries. So I don't know where...
it does it when it flashes to my low battery.
Oh, yeah. I know. Not a big deal. All right, so we can't wait for it. It is Saturday at 4 o'clock Eastern time on Fox. Ohio State, 6th ranked in the country. Penn State, undefeated at number 2. Claire Crawford from theozone.net and her podcast. Please join her right there with Joe Dexter. Oh, hail no, for the best in Ohio State football coverage. Claire, we always appreciate the discussion. It's always a good time.
Thank you so much for having me on. You can't stop me from talking, that's for sure.